Feature match review, I guess. Welcome back to the Joshua Schmidt feature match review channel. YCS Bologna was an event to remember. 2,500 plus players playing in one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most diverse formats. You could literally play any deck and win if you were the player to do it. However, just as the sky is blue and Dante 1, Seer 2, Barfa viewers, the Germans have to show up to a tournament with a runic variant. So it's time to reintroduce Joshua Schmidt back to the channel. Joshua Schmidt is a 3-time YCS champion, and at YCS Bologna, he has fallen back to Old Faithful, a runic deck. I've talked a lot about the strategy on the channel before, so I'll spare the redundancy, but let's just say free bodies from the extra deck and theoretically infinite resources over the course of a game, at the cost of your battle phase. The whole goal is to grind your opponent into oblivion, and it takes tireless mechanical ability to be able to keep your resource loop going. Across the table from Joshua is a strong but certainly underdog duelist emerging from one of the most stacked top 8s out there. I mean, you basically have 100 YCS tops in one picture. Anthony Lopez hails from Luxembourg, and while he doesn't have Joshua Schmidt's accolades, he has his fair share of top cuts, with his most impressive being a runner-up performance at YCS Lyon at the end of Tier Limits format. Here, he made it through with Rescue Ace, surprisingly not the most represented deck overall in the tournament, and people thought it was starting to lose its best deck title, but then good players stuck to their guns, and it had a great conversion rate. So let's assess how these two decks stack up versus each other. And I'll start by saying it's very asymmetrical. The runic decks are all about maintaining Runic Fountain on the field during your opponent's turn to allow your runic cards to gain free value. Joshua has incorporated another incredibly powerful and recursive engine within his deck, the Bestials. Coupled with some level 4 tuners in the branded suite, your best normal summon now becomes Guiding Clem. This can allow you to perform a variety of synchro summons almost similar to Runic Naturia. For example, like going into Tri-Edge Master for a quick draw 1, and then any level 10 synchro of your choice. Or you could just fusion summon with the Cartesia you summoned back from the graveyard. But the star of the show is Branded Regain, a card that every time a light or dark is banished allows you to draw a card, and if your opponent summons a monster, you summon a Bestial from the graveyard, which like 80% of the time is Bestial Magnamut. Two engines that just keep going. They are going to outgrind your opponent if they can get set up. Most dedicated players should already know what Rescue Ace does, but basically the entire goal of the deck is to resolve the effect of Turbulence. However, one thing that Rescue Ace lacks, and the rest of the format in general, is solid in-archetype spell trap removal. While many people clamor the death of Runic with the release of SP Little Knight, which, you're not wrong, is a really big threat to Runic decks, you have to first make it to that point, and number 2, play after you commit into the SP Little Knight, and not every deck can do that so easily. However, there are other helpful effects from Rescue Ace that make this matchup a little bit more manageable. We'll get into that in a little bit. For now, let's get into Game 1 of the Grand Final of YCS Bologna. Anthony immediately leads off with a strong combo. The most important thing to note as he combos off is that he knows what deck Joshua is playing. He has an even greater advantage in this Game 1. Anthony knows he doesn't need to play around Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler because typically runic decks can't afford to play those cards. This board seems a bit innocuous, but this is Rescue Ace's best board to counter runic. We'll see in a bit. Anthony passes back turn with 2 cards remaining in his hand. Joshua's opening is Runic Dispelling, Runic Tip, Runic Slumber, Guiding Clem, Bestial Lubellion, and Bestial Serenir. Joshua starts off with the Bestial Lubellion to add Magnamut, the advantage generator of the deck. Joshua then proceeds to the battle phase and then summons the Magnamut by banishing the Lubellion from his graveyard, trying to force interaction here from Anthony. Anthony, first, doesn't want to lose his IEP, and second, wants to keep his Preventer effect live. Anthony's Preventer is one of the silver bullets in this matchup. Therefore, Anthony meets the Magnamut with a Contain, negating the Magnamut and preventing it from attacking, as well as being used as material for an extra deck summon. So with Contain's negation out of the way, Joshua moves to activate Runic Dispelling, summoning Hugin from the extra deck. Hugin then discards the Serenir to search the one, the only, the Runic Fountain. The next play for Joshua is to go for Runic Tip. He needs to deny this Masquerena in order for his Fountain to resolve cleanly. He needs to deny SP Little Knight on his own turn. And there are two options that he can take here. You can either A, add freezing curses to negate the effect, or B, you can add flashing fire to destroy the monster. The overall runic objective calls for you to pick up flashing fire. You need to take the link rating off the field of Anthony because you don't have a battle phase to actually contest the field. You need to clear everything via card effects. So Joshua picks up the flashing fire, but wildly enough, this loses Joshua the game instantly. Joshua moves to activate Runic Fountain. And then next up, normal summons Guiding Quem. Quem will send Cartesia from the deck to the graveyard, and now the Bestial Lubellion from the graveyard tributes the Magnuma from the field to summon itself. And then this sequence goes down.
Trap here, because we do not want to have Lubellion resolved. So the regained is a super important aspect of the deck here. We're gonna chain.
Slumber, wow.
Wow. So the Extinguish being stopped by the Slumber Protection here, so that we can keep our Lubellion on the field and on the new chain as well. Really importantly, huge dodge on the Slumber.
Goes
But
for
now,
the IP.
Now critically here, after Chainlink 3 IP, Flashing Fire goes to destroy the Masquerena to prevent its Link Summon. But as Chainlink 5, Anthony responds with potentially his last interruption, Rescue, which goes to summon Turbulence from the graveyard. As the chain resolves, IP is destroyed, and the Lubellion is protected. But since the IP left the field from an opponent's card effect while the Turbulence was on the field, the Turbulence effect triggers. On a new chain, Chainlink 1 is Fountain's effect to draw 3, Chainlink 2 is Turbulence, targeting the Fountain. Joshua misses out on his draw 3. Basically out of cards and one live effect remaining on the board, Joshua goes to activate the Bestial Lubellion and is instantly met with an effect veiler from the hand. Joshua, with no cards in hand and no plays on the board, passes turn to Anthony, where he essentially just walks it in for the win. Game 1 goes to Rescue Ace. So what difference would freezing curses have made here? Well, it would have prevented the Turbulence from being able to trigger off of IP Masquerena's destruction. While in your head, you're trying to accomplish the runic objective of clearing monsters off of the field, sometimes it's easy to overlook some niche interactions that you weren't prepared for, especially after the fatigue of 2 days of competition and nigh on 18 rounds of gameplay. However, it was revealed afterwards that the last card in Anthony's hand past the effect veiler was an Ash Blossom, so theoretically it didn't matter what happened, but what if that card was a blank? Joshua would be back in the game if he had picked up freezing curses. So after a 20-minute back and forth, Joshua has a lot of ground to make up from game 1. But game 2, he plays smoother than a soon-to-be sponsored by Playmat Maker. Sponsor me, please. In the draw phase, Joshua begins with Runic Tip for Fountain. Joshua is going to play around Ash Blossom like a machine. Little does Anthony know, Ash Blossom on tip is going to be the last good point he'll ever have to use that card. Joshua goes to the main phase to activate his Runic Fountain, and then activates Runic Slumber to summon Hugin. Chainlink 1 is Fountain to draw 2, Chainlink 2 is Hugin discarding Sereneer to add a second Fountain, chain blocking it so the Fountain draws cannot be hit by Ash Blossom. So Joshua gets in his search and draw 2. Then Sereneer dumps a Magnuma? Why not just a Lubellion like the rest of us? Joshua has a Bestial in hand. This is yet another way to play around Ash Blossom from Joshua. He already has the Branded Regain in hand, so the Sereneer sending the Magnuma guarantees the Magnuma gets into rotation, allowing it to be summoned from the graveyard, instead of being forced to add it from the hand by Lubellion's discard effect, which is just another opportunity for Ash Blossom to be used effectively. Joshua uses Lubellion to search the Bestial Alibur. This card just exists to be a level 4 tuner that is searchable off of Lubellion, just to get those synchro plays started, as we'll see. Now Joshua normal summons the Bestial Alibur to synchro summon a Coral Dragon, Runic Fountain comes down, and Joshua then activates Dispelling to get the level 4 Gary on the field. Chainlink 1 Fountain, Chainlink 2 Gary. Basically, out of frustration, Anthony, with nowhere to use his effect veiler, efficiently just drops it on the Gary. Now Joshua synchro summons the level 6 tuner and the level 4 Gary into Baron, where he gets another draw. Almost as a laugh, Joshua activates Branded Regained, using a Bestial to banish the Gary to summon it. Regain puts back the Gary to draw Joshua the 6th card of the turn. And then he just fires a Destruction to summon Gary again to add back the Fountain. It's just so ignorant. Joshua Link summons SP and then passes with like 6 cards in hand. Play goes back to Anthony. Whereas a couple of turns of passing back and forth, as Joshua does not have a battle phase, he saved up 7 cards to put a massive push onto the board. But the overwhelming sea of cards that Anthony has to swim through is just simply too much for even 7 cards to try and push through. Can't slow roll this game, we're going to game 3. So Anthony's an extremely based Yu-Gi-Oh player. He doesn't play a single time card in his deck. No life point gain, no burn. But that's just a problem. He can either go first, set up a board and hope that play will return back to him in time to get a battle phase in and somehow go for damage, or he can decide to go second and attempt to somehow squeak in some damage versus Joshua, where most definitely he will only have 1 battle phase to do damage and to give himself a second shot where he couldn't do it with even 7 cards the first time around. The catch-22 in this situation, though, is that Joshua certainly has cards that allow him to gain or burn his opponent for damage in both scenarios. Anthony sees a better chance in going first to maybe tie life points so that the game can descend into turns, rather than try and break the board of Joshua and get in damage through battle against a deck that just has infinite chump blockers. So as game 3 begins, Anthony goes to blitz out an opening combo. It's normal summon Airlifter for emergency, wanted for Diabellstar. Diabellstar set Original Sinful. Original Sinful summons Hydrant. Hydrant will pick up Preventer here. At this moment, that is summon number 3. Anthony knows that Nibiru is in the deck of Joshua, and getting Preventer to the hand plays around that for a guarantee. And Joshua is sure as hell pensive, waiting. After blitzing this all out in 45 seconds, Anthony pauses for a moment. Did he just make a mistake? With Hydrant on the field, he makes Link Karibo, but then it strikes Anthony that he doesn't have another Rescue Ace monster in his hand for emergency besides the Preventer. So his choice to go into SB Little Knight is not an option here for Anthony. So Anthony goes for an emergency into Turbulence. And folks, that's summon number 5. And Nibiru the Primal Being comes down. Likely in a rush, the heat of the moment, it's the freaking finals, Anthony has stumbled, but it's fine as he has deliberately kept his Preventer in hand to be able to play through the Nibiru. He can banish the Turbulence and link off the Nibiru token and the Preventer into something like an IP to summon back the Turbulence with Preventer's Graveyard effect. And then he can easily set 4 and maybe full stop Joshua. But I didn't finish the chain link. Nibiru is just chain link 1. Chain link 2 is the Bestial Druis Worm targeting Diabellstar. The chain resolves. Druis Worm summons, and then Nibiru tributes the entire board. Druis Worm's Graveyard effect triggers, sending the token away from Anthony. There is nothing to perform a link summon with to summon back the Turbulence. The Nibiru plus Druis Worm is putting Anthony in a very, very dark hole. So it's Preventer set 1 pass with 6 minutes on the clock. Not before Joshua also has a Magnamut that banishes the Link Karibo for more bodies on board and more resources. And more potential damage that Anthony is somehow going to have to make up. Play goes back to Joshua, and he immediately starts off with a devastating normal summon in Quem. It immediately threatens big synchro plays with the Magnamut on field, but there's just simply nothing Anthony can do. Baron to floor is made, and then Joshua goes for a bit of a funny line, summoning Lubellion from the hand, and then activates the effect, placing Branded Regained right into the Imperm column. Joshua then proceeds into a duality for Scarlight. It's definitely getting hazy here. He could swing for more damage theoretically, but just playing everything as safe as possible. Swing, swing, hit for 3,000 damage to the face, and make SP Little Knight. Pass back to Anthony with just 2 minutes on the clock. With hardly any resources remaining, Anthony has to find a way to deal with the Baron, SP, regain that summons back a Druid's Worm to continue body blocking, and come up with a solution to say battle phase in under 2 minutes. Even if he had time, he still wouldn't win this. As the clock hits 0, Anthony is stuck in his main phase, with no way to deal 3,000 damage in this phase, and with the clock at 0, Anthony Lopez concedes to Joshua, and Joshua Schmidt wins his 4th YCS at Bologna with one of the biggest surprise decks in YCS history. No one even had a runic deck on their radar. I'll spare you guys a sappy conclusion and just say, Joshua, you're a really good streamer. Thanks for watching.
Attention duelists, your champion of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series live in Bologna is none other than the man himself, Joshua Schmidt!
And shoutouts to the one, the only, Zachary Jones. You're on the bubble, baby. Join up as well on the Patreon for a shoutout and nominating the next feature match. Till then, peace.